Welcome back to the Underwater Tribe podcast. Today we've got both Luca and myself, Mike, in studio. And today's special guest, Dr. Mark Erdmann.
Howdy, Mike.
How are you?
Good.
Excellent. For the people in the audience, maybe, the divers and the photographers and the conservationists out there, they will know who you are. But, maybe some of the people in the audience, they don't know. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Sure. So I guess I would describe myself as a coral reef ecologist and marine conservationist. I came to Indonesia initially in 1991 to do my PhD work and basically lived here more or less nonstop for 25 years. I then moved to New Zealand about 4 years ago, where I'm based now, but still frequently coming to Indonesia. My initial focus here was actually, during my PhD, was on mantis shrimp. For my PhD, but I very quickly got involved with destructive fishing issues because I was living in a small Makassarese fishing village where all of my neighbors were bomb fishermen, cyanide fishermen, and shark finners. So that very quickly pulled me into the marine conservation realm. And by 1999, I had moved to, 1997, moved to North Sulawesi to do my postdoc there. And by 1999, I was working for Bunaka National Park for a USAID project to revise the management of the park. And then 2001, I did my first trip to Raja Ampat to do a marine survey there for the Nature Conservancy. And not too long thereafter, I was hired by Conservation International to take over basically and develop their program in Raja Ampat. So was largely focused on Raja Ampat and the broader Bird's Head Seascape of West Papua from 2004 until 2014, at which point I then moved to New Zealand. And I'm still very much involved in that work, but also now kind of moving around Fiji, Samoa, New Caledonia.
Okay, so more your reach has broadened, shall we say?
Yeah. So in 2014, I was promoted to become our vice president of Asia Pacific Marine Programs for Conservation International. So now my scope includes Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea, Solomons, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, and Philippines.
Everywhere.
So, yeah.
So even less time at home now.
Yes.
Okay. And so with that, I mean, going back to where you were saying at the beginning, so 1991, all the way through that, you was all in Sulawesi, living up all through that graduate work and all that?
Yeah, so I lived in South Sulawesi from 91 till 96, predominantly on a little Makassarese fishing village, Barang Lampo, off of Makassar. Although with a year in Wakatobi. So that was before Wakatobi was a national park, and the Operation Walesia program was just setting up. So I was the initial science officer for Operation Walesia, and we did the initial surveys of the park, of the proposed park, to then be able to actually have it designated as a park with zonation system. So
okay. Yeah. And so with the destructive fishing and all that kind of stuff, have you been back to that area much in the last, say, 10 years or something like that?
A bit, I certainly have. And I think what I would say, the one thing which is kind of nice when you have, a decadal long type of view on these things, perspective, is that I'm actually very optimistic about the situation in Indonesia. In 1991, when I moved here, Indonesia, despite being the world's largest archipelagic nation, having the most coral reef, etc., was very, very focused inwards. It did not think about the ocean. Certainly there were plenty of coastal villagers who made their living from the ocean, but if you looked at the way that Jakarta viewed its marine resources, they almost pretended it wasn't there. I mean, this was a country that was built on mining and forestry and rice farming, and they just didn't think about the oceans. And so in those days, even though bomb fishing was illegal and cyanide fishing was illegal, it was a minor crime. If by some incredible stroke of luck a bomb fishing incident actually was caught by the police or reported, it was literally viewed as less of a crime than stealing a neighbor's chicken. Right. And I think that nowadays it's fair to say that pretty much everywhere across the archipelago, law enforcement agencies are aware that bomb fishing is a bad thing, that it steals the future of the Indonesian children, that from a food security perspective it's horrible, it ruins all the potential of marine tourism, and bomb fishermen actually go to jail now. Back then, you were lucky if they even got slapped with 100,000 rupiah fine.
Right.
Usually it was just like, oh, what is this bomb fishing? Let these guys go. Let's focus on the chicken stealers. So from that perspective, I would say there's been a massive change in attitude that you can see. And the country now does recognize that its marine resources are one of its most valuable assets. And I won't say that by any means is all of the management of the marine realm yet perfect. There's lots of issues that still exist. But we have a minister of fisheries who blows up foreign vessels. I mean, that was unheard of in 1991. So you look at the expansion of marine protected areas, you look at the expansion of protections on given marine species like mantas and whale sharks, the number of people that have now been thrown in jail for bomb fishing and cyanide fishing, there really has been a pretty significant advancement in Indonesia. Now, to be sure, along those times, there's also been a great expansion in population growth. Tourism has gone from almost a nothingness to now, I look at it as kind of this transition where in the 2000s to 2015 maybe, tourism was our great hope, in marine tourism that is.
Right.
And now it's getting to the point where in a number of parts of Indonesia, I think it's actually becoming a threat, and we
It's
really
not
need to be thinking
sustainable.
about, it's mass tourism as
Right,
opposed
too
to
many people.
So these are all massive changes when you think about it over the course of coming up on 30 years now, but mostly positive.
Right.
I'd rather be I think it's easier to sort out marine tourism issues than it is to sort out bomb fishing.
Oh, for sure. This one is one is permanent. The other one is something you can do something about. And that's actually interesting that you mentioned with Susie, because they just had the big ocean conference here last week, and I think that was a lot of the stuff that they were talking about, using Indonesia as an example of the growth of marine parks and stuff like that, and how the government is actually very proactive now, as you say, compared to what it was. So when you first, at the beginning, you mentioned how you were originally contracted to help Bunaken come back in, and that's a perfect example of a park that back then in the 90s was probably not that well known, but now you talk about divers, divers especially. Everybody knows Bunaken. Raja Ampat is probably even more of a microcosm. When did you say you went there the first time?
2001.
2001, and how many operators were there then? 2?
There was 1 liveaboard and 1 resort.
And so in less than 20 years, we've got, I don't know how many boats and how many liveaboards. So a definite success story on that one. But about that, what you were just saying with the tourism stuff, one of the things that, looking at the books that you guys have put out, like the Bird's Head Seascape and all that stuff, you guys have always been very proactive in building tourism to those areas. Is that still something that you guys are, actively interested in building the tourism?
I think at this point we're more interested in managing the tourism and in trying to spread it out more. Those books that let me take a back step for a second and just explain. When we first started really working hard in Raja Ampat in 2003, it was a brand new regency, a new Kabupaten, and they, of course, have to develop their economic development model. And in 2003, the economic development model on the books for Raja Ampat was mining and forestry.
Right.
And we immediately inserted ourselves into that, and we said, this is not a sustainable future for you, and you really have something special here, and we believe that tourism could be that, the economic driver that really, catapults you ahead. And they were skeptical, right? I'm like, tourism, how much can it really generate, and blah, blah, blah. And we actually spent a fair bit of energy taking, for instance, the Bupati, in essence, the governor of Raja Ampat. We took him to a number of places, Bunaken, et cetera, but we eventually took him to Hawaii. Now, we took him to Hawaii not because I think that Hawaii is a good model for him to try to follow, but simply because as Papuans, they didn't really have this notion that tourism could ever generate significant funds. And so we chose Hawaii because we thought, you know what? As much as we don't want Raja Ampat to ever look like Hawaii, we want him to see that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, that it drives economies. And so we did that. And he came back a changed man. He's like, okay, I get it. We're doing this. Now, he then started recommending that we have wet T-shirt contests in Raja Ampat, which didn't seem in line with the culture. But nonetheless, it was a change. And so then, from 2003 onwards, we really did push for tourism to become the main economic driver of Raja Ampat. And I think it's fair to say at this point it is.
It certainly is. Yeah.
But it's also gotten now to the point where it is threatening things.
And
now
you got to put
there's too much
regulations on the numbers.
And I think one of the sad lessons learned for us, for me as a conservationist, you like to think that you build something and it stays, and you just you bank that progress and you can keep moving on. The kind of sad thing that we learned there is that in 2009 we actually already saw Raja Ampat tourism was ramping up very dramatically, and it was good. It was all good. There was more money coming in through the entrance fee system to fund patrols. Everything was looking good, but we saw where it was going. And in 2009, we worked very hard to put into place a series of regulations to control tourism in Raja Ampat. Mm-hmm. There was a cap put on the number of liveaboard licenses at 40. This was in 2009, yeah? There was regulations that went into place in terms of resort construction, how it had to be, what waste management had to look like, hiring of local people within 75% of their workforce had to be local people as opposed to bringing English-speaking Jakartans or Balinese, etc. So it actually, we were quite proud of that, and it looked like it was really good. Unfortunately, what we learned there is that when the political situation changes, all of those things can be thrown out the door right overnight.
Right.
And the new Bupati of Raja Ampat came in, convinced that tourism was indeed the goose that's going to lay the golden egg. But his vision of the tourism that he wanted to see for Raja Ampat was very different from the vision that we had when they were in those regulations. And those regulations were immediately scrapped, thrown out the door.
Okay.
And in comes the idea of mass tourism. And it took about a year and a half to actually make inroads to the Bupati, build the trust with the new political system, that he was willing to actually listen to us and come to the conclusion that actually mass tourism is not what we want in Raja Ampat. But unfortunately, by that time, the genie was already a little bit out of the bottle. We already had some charter flights bringing in, package tourists from China. And I don't want to say anything bad about Chinese tourists per se, but package tourism to Raja Ampat is kind of at odds with the model that we would like to see for there, irrespective of where it's coming from.
Gotcha.
So anyway, so at this point, I think our vision, and I should add, we're struggling to make sure that we have the funding to actually do this right now, because some of the marine donors have changed their focus from marine protected areas to fisheries now. Our hope is really to be able to spread that tourism interest, and that's what those books were all about. Was about saying, look, there's not just 5 dive sites in Raja Ampat. There's well over 100, and you should spread the time. But now we want people also seeing Cendrawasih. We want them going to Fakfak, Kaimana, etc. And by spreading it, we think that this is a big area.
It's a huge area. I mean, even Raja Ampat itself is big, and you go to areas out to the western end, and you don't see anybody. You're the only one out there because people are still concentrating on certain areas, which is good and bad. I mean, it's good if you know the other areas. It's not so good if it's the only areas you know to go to. So for sure.
This this moment now that we have so many operations, we start to feel it also like amongst the local operators. So the liveaboards here in Indonesia, they start to feel that it's getting too packed.
Yeah.
So they start to think about asking questions to their guests. What would you feel if we don't go to maybe Raja Ampat for the season, but we go somewhere else? We want to avoid to be there with another 50 liveaboards like this. So we, oddly enough, because Raja Ampat is still marketing-wise, you say trip to Raja Ampat, it's easy to sell. If you say trip to Fakfak, besides sounding a bit weird, like people will say, "I'm gonna say where it's gonna be," but still, some of them are ready to take to make
more
the
adventure
effort.
tourists.
Go more adventure, exactly.
Exactly. And the tourists that were very excited, the dive guests that wanted to go to Raja Ampat in 2005 and were really in that pioneering mode, yeah, for them now, it's like there's nothing pioneering anymore when I see 4 other liveaboards next to my dive site. So they're the ones who will, of course, then pioneer the next place.
Let's bring back that spark.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
And how was the whole situation when you built the tourism there and the socialization of it with the local people? You guys were pretty much the first ones in there, other than, as you say, you had a couple operators there, but down in the Misrule area where people maybe had not seen anyone at all. What was it like going into the village and saying, were the people open to the idea, saying, hey, we'd like to come in and bring people to explore the reef? Was there a lot of pushback, or is everyone fairly?
I think that so when we first started the work in Raja Ampat, and I should add that this was very much with our partner organization, Nature Conservancy, TNC, we held a major kind of Adat gathering of all of the village chiefs and Adat leaders from Raja Ampat in 2003 in Tomolol, actually, in southeast Misol. And that was if I recall correctly, it was a 5-day kind of meeting. And what we basically gave a chance of all of them to talk about what their concerns were about Raja Ampat and where it was headed and resource use, et cetera. And what was unanimous was their concern over the bomb fishing, the shark finning, just basically all the outside fishing that was raping their resources. The people of Raja Ampat, of course, feel marine tenure. They believe they own their reefs, which in general is a great way of keeping them well maintained. But when they start having big outside boats coming in, especially those with bombs and guns and things, it became a little bit harder to fend those off. So they were fed up by that time. And honestly speaking, when I moved to South Sulawesi in 1991, I was living on this little Makassar's fishing village island, and some of the shark finning boats would go off to Papua. This is 1991, right? And they would come back with these fantastic stories, because I'd hang out with these guys and try to get information from them. Fantastic stories of this just stunningly beautiful place with these amazing beehive islands and all the sharks that were there and blah blah blah, and then I'd see all the shark fin there already, whatever else. I'm like, wow, it's really sad that that's happening, but maybe someday I'll get a chance to see it. And it was 2001. I finally got to go to Wayag, and I'm like, this is what they were talking about right now. And sure enough, there were shark finners everywhere, and it was just
really
it was horrible, absolutely horrible. But yeah, so the main point is they had been being raped for over a decade by that time, their resources, and so they wanted an end to that. And we discussed at length the notion of setting up a series of marine parks around Raja Ampat that would be not national parks that are controlled from Jakarta, but rather locally managed marine protected areas where those people, the people who own those areas, would be trained as the rangers, would be trained as the managers, etc. And they were totally on board with that almost from the outset. I mean, I shouldn't say almost, immediately. They wanted it. They're like, let's do it tomorrow. Which one of the things I love about working in Papua, Papuans don't. They make a decision, they're like, okay, Suda, let's do it. And we said, okay, but we also need to worry a little bit about the economics of the situation too. And we talked about tourism, and they were all very pro to the idea for the most part. There were a few who had ideas about, well, we don't want naked people coming. The standard thing when you talk to a remote villager, like, well, we don't want people coming and having naked parties in front of our children. And, we said, okay, well, that's not really what dive tourism is about. So it was all generally good. The one issue that we had with tourism development there, though, is that we said, okay, look, if we're going to set up these marine parks and we're going to have tourism coming in, one of the things that we really want to do is to set up an entrance fee system, a tourism user fee system. And that will be to eventually help fund these patrols and things. We said, look, in the short term, we as NGOs, conservation NGOs, are happy to fund patrol boats and patrols, but we won't be here for forever. So we really need to set up a sustainable financing mechanism. And they were like, yeah, sure, go ahead. But again, because Papua is very tribal, right? They're all very cut up. This is my bit, that's your bit, whatever. The notion immediately when we talked about this is like, okay, well, they can pay, $2 per diver per reef. And so however many times they dive on my reef, they'll pay me that, and when they dive over there. And we said, this isn't really the direction we want to go. And we said, part of the problem that you have there is that, this village owns, if you think about Wayag, it's owned by Selpele and Saleo
Right.
villages, which is 25 nautical miles away. And they own a huge area of sea. If you had to go and report to them each time and drink some, sweet tea and blah, blah, blah for an hour and a half before going. I mean, you know very well as dive guides how this would be. So we said that this just, it's not chocho. It was not going to work with dive tourism. So we said, we need to set into place an entrance fee system, which is a one entrance fee, single, they pay, and it's good. They're not paying to everybody. They're paying one ticket, and then that will be distributed amongst people. That was a difficult call, and at first there was a lot of unhappiness about that idea, because there's a feeling that's like, well, this is my reef, and my reef is better than their reef, and more people are diving on my reef, therefore I should get more, whatever. We kind of came to a bit of a standstill in terms of how to deal with that, and eventually I said, okay, I'll tell you what. Let's go do a study tour to Papua New Guinea, because Papua New Guinea has the same thing of marine tenure. They now have a big dive live aboard industry, which has been operating there in Milne Bay, for instance, for a lot longer. Let's go and see. So I actually took a study tour of some of our CI colleagues and some of the ADAT leaders from Raja Ampat to Milne Bay to view their entrance fee system. And I was really intrigued to see what we were going to find out, because on paper it looked like it was a very good thing. But when we actually got there and we had the meeting and we were listening to all the stakeholders, it immediately was clear that it was a completely dysfunctional concept, i.e. the one where you were paid per dive
reef,
on the per reef kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. It created massive social conflict. People who before were happily living in villages together now were beating each other up because, who's getting the money for this dive?
Right.
And or you said, oh, this...
What have we
and
done?
the villagers kind of, the ADAT heads we had, they said, oh, this doesn't work so well. So when we came back, we were able to kind of report that, and everyone said, okay, we'll go with the single thing that's distributed. And, it's not perfect. There's still villages within Raja Ampat who make issues. There's always troublemakers when you have enough people around. But for the most part, it's been accepted. And at this point, it's not even, the entrance fee proceeds in Raja Ampat are now close to $2 million a year.
Wow.
And they're no longer are they actually going to the villages, because the villages are making enough money from tourism and other ways right now anyway. The $2 million is actually staying 100% to fund the patrol system and the management of the marine park. So, and that's had its issues over the last year, but I'm very happy with the new head of the marine park system for Raja Ampat, and I'm quite optimistic about where things will go. So, yeah.
And is CI still heavily involved with Raja Ampat, or you've kind of stepped aside? Or you yourself have stepped aside because you've taken on new roles?
I've taken on a new role, and so I'm not there as much, but I still find myself there probably 3 to 5 days of every month. The thing which has happened with CI is that we did have 12 wonderful years of very strong support from the Walton Family Foundation and the Packard Foundation, a number of big marine foundations. Unfortunately, those foundations have now kind of come to the conclusion that they've done the marine park thing, and now they want to do sustainable fisheries management.
Oh, okay.
Which in and of itself isn't necessarily at odds to what we were doing. I mean, all of the marine parks that were set up in Raja Ampat were actually set up not on the basis of biodiversity conservation, but actually on the basis of protecting the fish stocks for the local community. So to us, that is fisheries management, and it's a very primary form of fisheries management. And so we thought, okay, well, we've always called this fisheries management tool, and we'll keep going that way. But unfortunately, the foundations are more interested in kind of large export fisheries, tuna, blue swimmer crab, and deepwater snapper. And so they've really changed focus dramatically. And that's left us in a bit of a situation, because we built a pretty big system there with 200 plus staff, and then there was also the Nature Conservancy and WWF, and it's hard to keep that going. So our staff has now contracted quite significantly, and we're down to I think about 35 staff now in Raja, and we just don't have the operating funds that we used to do. I'm working hard to try to refill those coffers right now, and we do have a number of private donors that are still very interested in Raja Ampat. But we have this issue that many people know that it was a very well-funded program. So most donors are like, well, we don't need to do anything with Raja Ampat.
Right.
It's either already fixed
It's
or
already covered.
whatever. And the reality is, of course, I feel very strongly that it's never fixed. The reality is new threats evolve continuously in these places. And it's a sad fact that anywhere on the planet where a conservation NGO or a conservation project has operated for 5-10 years, when that leaves, almost invariably things settle back down to a less thing. And you know, I've experienced that myself with Bunaken here in Indonesia, and we tried very much to set up Raja Ampat in a way that with that entrance fee system, that the financing is there, that we train the local communities in being the rangers and the managers. So it's a relatively robust model, but the reality is, you know, government officials don't wake up in the morning thinking, what can I do to save Raja Ampat? Right. Once they become a government official, it's a 9-to-5 job, and there's only a certain amount of passion you can expect out of them. And so I believe there will always be an important role for conservation NGOs. They might not have to be doing everything anymore. I mean, in the old days, you know, we were paying for all the rangers, all the patrols, everything was paid for by us. We don't need to do that anymore. But we do need to have some passionate staff on the ground who are looking at what's going on, and when a new threat arises, for instance, mass tourism or cruise ships that are starting to go through the Dampier Strait, we need somebody who's flexible and adaptive and is like, hey, we need to do something about that now. We need a new regulation. We need to stop this. We need to change that. And that's what I'm hopeful that we will have the finances to be able to do it. So we by no means are exiting from Raja Ampat. We're a smaller organization than we were before, but we are very much aware of the issues that have now arisen, and we are committed to trying to do something about those with the government and communities, of course. So.
As you say, if they've got that much money coming in now in entrance fees and all that yearly, obviously that money must also be going towards some of the patrols and the management and all that stuff as well. So,
and I will say one other thing, Mike, which makes me happy to see. You know, when we first started working there were no local NGOs. There were, you know, we were kind of lone rangers out there. Obviously, the dive operators were very supportive of us, and we leaned on them a lot and got a lot of information, a lot of help from them. But there weren't really local groups doing anything there. There were the local villagers, there was local government, and then there were the NGOs working. That landscape has changed dramatically now, and there's a lot of local NGOs, some of which are actually associated with dive resorts. So obviously Misol Eco Resort has the Misol Besefton Foundation, Papua Diving has the Raja Ampat Research and Conservation Center, Papua Explorers now has Raja Ampat Sea Center, and there's a number, I shouldn't mention them probably all, but there's a number that are doing that, and they're pumping some of their profits from the dive resort into, you know, actual conservation things. That's a wonderful situation because that's actually far long-term sustainable than us. There's additionally now, you know, there's local guides associations in Raja Ampat, and there's local people who are now dive guides and dive instructors. There's actually Raja Ampat dive instructors now, and they care about things, and they're active on social media, and they're getting angry when they see a ship, you know, grounding and that kind of thing. And that to me is wonderful. We're building a civil society there that actually cares. Now, at the same time, we've got a hell of a lot more tourists, and there's no doubt that some of Raja Ampat has suffered from some of this. But still, if I compare to 2001, I think a lot of people they lose that longer term perspective. And to me, you know, I was just there, and yes, there are some crown of thorns there. By no means is it killing all of Raja Ampat. It's very localized. Yes, there has been some bleaching, and yes, there has been damage from anchors and this, that, and the other. But you don't see the bomb. When I came there in 2001, bomb fishing was rampant. I mean, like you went underwater, you heard 10 bomb blasts in a single dive.
Wow.
There were shark finners everywhere. Now you actually see sharks. You didn't used to see sharks there. I mean, it was always an interesting place, but you didn't see. So it's still on the whole, it's a success story, I would say, and I think that we hopefully will prevent it from sinking down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you say, you'd much rather have a few smaller conflicts, social conflicts between groups of tourists than you would just someone throwing bombs.
Absolutely. Yeah. As you said before, actually, the private sector plays an important role, I think.
Absolutely.
When I was in Egypt, in Red Sea, like in Sharm el Sheikh, we had like 300 boats leaving daily with 25 divers on a way smaller place than what would be Raja Ampat.
Right.
But one thing, though, I have to say that all of us, we really had a very good principle. We really thought about, we need to care about, as a dive guide, about this ocean is a threat, by us too.
Yeah.
If we let our divers go with the fins on the corals, they're gonna destroy and so on. So we had this general understanding amongst us that we would be the one actually patrolling underwater, and very hardly ever you would have seen, you know, somebody going outside the rules and be with the fins on the reef. And if we would see somebody like that, we would go there and tell, hey, pick up your fins, time to go. And eventually, if we see that somebody does that more often, then we're gonna report it to the people in charge of the marine park, and then they would take action. But there were not that many people in charge of that marine park. Most of the job was done actually by naturally by us. Like that. So it's quite important, I think, to pass this message also here in Indonesia, that everyone that is over there working has a responsibility to maintain the reef.
And I think that to me is one thing which it needs some refreshing right now, because if I look at kind of what the liveaboard industry was in 2008 or 2010 in Raja Ampat, I can say with a fair degree of sincerity that I do believe that almost 90% of them were very environmentally concerned and were really trying to do the right thing. I have this feeling that, you know, the liveaboard industry, the fleet has just ballooned right now, and there's so many boats in Raja Ampat now that I've never seen before, and I'm sure that a number of them are indeed ones which are run by people who really want to do the right thing, but I have to believe that, at least from what I hear from some of the resorts and things, you know, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily know what they're doing. So we you know, there was a lot of effort back in 2000 to engage all the liveaboards and have everyone as a community and whatever. That we need more of that now, I think. Absolutely. More than ever, probably. But
yeah, because you get, as you say, I was just out there recently as well, and I used to know every boat. Now I'm like, no idea.
Exactly.
And where, you know, are they coming in from? Are they just brand new? Oh, I want to, this is where I want to have my boat. So you said they might not necessarily know what they're doing. But yeah, it is kind of interesting now, though. There is a few places where there is a little bit more pressure. That there wouldn't have been.
Absolutely.
And I was definitely glad to be there in October, as opposed to, you know, going in December, January, for sure. But what's interesting, as you're mentioning about the local NGOs and stuff like that, how much do you know about, you know, in the Arborec area, the Manta Sandy? And it seems to me that it's a local project where they now have the registration system with you have to check in and all that stuff when you dive there. Was that a completely local product? Do you know?
No, it was absolutely a cooperative type of thing. I would say CI has tried to play a supporting role in that very purposefully. We did not want to be in the front of that because, as I said, we're at a point now where we just don't have huge amounts of funding, and we wanted to encourage the local management. So that was very much led by a group of the concerned dive resorts more than anything, along with some of the homestays. You know, we tried to help from behind, in particular in connecting them to the government, because one thing which you tend to find with dive resorts and things is they look at the government as like, you know, they're just a pain in the ass who are trying to tax me. But we as a conservation NGO look at the government as, well, they're actually the people who you know, have the authority to manage, and so you have to work with the government and keep them on board and keep them engaged and want them working with you if you really want to be effective. It can be very difficult if you're running it alone against the wishes of the government. So that was really where I think we played our role, was in making sure that this was firmly in collaboration with the Department of Tourism as well as the Raja Ampat MPA Management Authority. And you know, I give 1,000% credit to the few folks from some of the local resorts and homestays that really drove that process forward. And I'm sure it's not being implemented 100% effectively, but it was a movement that had to happen, because it was getting to the point of I have a few images of over 100 divers on the bottom at Manta Sandy, which is just crazy, you know.
And when you first heard about that, I was like, oh, that might not work. But then you actually get there and you look at it and say, oh, actually, this is working, because they're controlling. All right, you know, same thing. There's just way too many people there. And it's nice.
And I think it's interesting because, you know, if you talk to I won't mention them by name, but if you talk to some of the pioneering liveaboard owners and resort owners, they look at something like the efforts to control mantis sandy, and they just it's like I hate this regulation,
right?
And it's because they were there when you didn't need to do that,
right?
And they're still kind of in this mindset that like it should be a pioneering experience. It's a wilderness experience, but the reality is Dampier Strait is no longer a wilderness experience.
No.
It really is not. I mean, it's an area which needs management at the level of what you have in the Galapagos now, and I would hope that we never have to get to the point where liveaboards have to like register their itineraries ahead of time and they can only go to these 6 places. I would hope that we don't get to that. But on the other hand, if the number of liveaboards triples, we will have to do that. And so I'd like to keep it from getting to that. But there will be places, especially where you've got a dense concentration of homestays and resorts as well as liveaboards, such as Dampier Strait. There just has to be some further management than what we had in the past, and it's the only solution. Really.
Yeah, it's the only way it's going to work efficiently, for sure. Speaking of which, what other project, you said you're not so much working on the Raja Ampat area now, but what about what's the word I'm looking for? But upcoming regions in Indonesia,
Sure.
or are there certain areas that you're trying to grow to take that spread away? You've got
absolutely.
Triton and Chenderwassi. Anything else that's going on?
So over the last year, we've been putting a lot of energy into Fak.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that it has a fantastic name.
It looks beautiful from the air. I passed by a few times.
Indeed, and it will take a while to get there, and it always takes a while when you're exploring a new area there's a lot of places that have been bombed without question, but there's also a lot of really special places there, and so we're working right now to try to identify enough sites to make it worth a liveaboard trip along there. And you've undoubtedly gone to a few of them. I mean, if you go to the Pisang Islands, in the mouth of Bintuni Bay, people have mixed views about it, but there are some really nice sites there, and it can be done quite nicely. But if you get down into Sabakor Bay and Salasi Bay, Karas, you probably know the Momon
waterfall.
Momon waterfall. If you go a little bit north from there's a big bay there, which we actually first surveyed in 2006. And our coral scientists found close to 40 new species of coral in that bay.
Okay.
It is something quite spectacular. I would encourage you to actually get out your Google Earth and blow up on it, because you can see the reef development from Google Earth satellite imagery, and you'll be like, wow, that looks pretty bloody interesting. And it is interesting. It's a really, really special place. So, and there's whale sharks along the Fak coast as well. Right, and we're trying to kind of develop that aspect a little bit too with the Bagan owners. We know that Raja Ampat's oceanic manta rays cruise that coastline, because we now have an acoustic receiver array all the way down the Fak coast, all the way down to Kaimana, and we're seeing that the mantas will go from Magic Mountain and they go all the way down that coastline. So we haven't yet figured out where the cleaning stations are and that kind of thing, but that will come. And so Fak is one that we'd really like to promote. Kaimana, Triton Bay, we started to promote that pretty hard in 2009, and Kaimana has always been a place which I personally love. I think it's absolutely spectacularly beautiful both above and below water, but we've had a little bit of issues with it because the communities there have been, quite frankly, what it comes down to is they were spoiled by mining and oil and gas before. Long ago, in the 1970s and 1980s, there was major oil, gas, and gold exploration there. And when they see foreigners, they think, pay money to get access.
And big expectations.
Yes, and I'm sure you've probably been on dive boats that have had issues there. And so it's a little bit, it's not as conducive of an area for tourism development as what we found with Raja, or for that matter, Fak. So we're now making a new stab at Kaimana, and we're going to do our best to get that.
What about
going
further
again,
south, going towards K Islands?
Well, that's certainly of interest as well. We have made a decision as a NGO, as an institution, to really focus our efforts on West Papua, Indo Papua, and not so much Maluku. That doesn't mean that Maluku doesn't have an enormous amount of potential there. And in the future, for us, it's quite frankly, it's just a practical issue of not having the funding to be able to start a whole new program.
If you could, you would do it.
If we could, I would. I mean, I've done enough of the Forgotten Islands trips to know that there's some spectacular reefs along the way, and I would love to work with those communities and get something going. But and that will happen, I'm sure. But it's going to wait a little while. And in the meantime, we don't want to turn our back on West Papua. I would add, besides Fak, Cendrawasih, I think, actually has a lot more to offer than people have given it credit for. I think that a lot of dive boats have made the mistake of trying to advertise Cendrawasih as Raja Ampat plus whale sharks. It's not Raja Ampat. Right. It's nothing like Raja Ampat, and you should never tell guests that you're going to see Raja Ampat there. It does have spectacularly beautiful and deserted beaches, so it's a great place to take families and have them do that. It's got some great snorkeling. Of course, it's got wrecks. There's actually really good muck diving in Cendrawasih that a lot of people have not properly explored, and I know that there would be a lot more if we really got into it. And the whale sharks, of course, are a very special attraction. But so Cendrawasih is a place that I really would like to have.
Yeah, you've done a lot there.
I have.
Doesn't Cendrawasih now holds the highest count of most different kind of corals? Of fish, different species of fish?
What Cendrawasih has is the highest within Indonesia, at least. It has the highest number of endemic species, i.e. reef fish species that are only found in Cendrawasih. And that's because it's been repeatedly over the last 14 million years, it's been isolated like a big giant lake, and evolution has kind of proceeded in its own fashion there. So there's a lot of endemics in Cendrawasih.
It's got its own fish.
Yeah. So that's a pretty interesting aspect to it, but it's not Raja. I mean, it does not have the fish biomass that Raja does. But it's still, I think it's an amazing place. And the last place that I'll tell you in West Papua that we're really pushing on right now, I'm about to do a major expedition there, is to Mapia, and I don't know if you've ever been there before. I've done a couple of trips where we've had one day there, and I've been tantalized by what I've seen. So we're going to go back and do a proper full-on survey there and try to establish. We know now that there are mantas there. We know there's a cleaning station. We're trying to figure out where that is. It is a little bit remote. It won't be an easy place to get people to all the time. But but
it's got silver tips. I saw a silver tip there. So they're there.
Yeah. So anyway, it's another place that we're going to work on a bit. But
what about for Cendrawasih? I've done a bunch of trips to the western end of Cendrawasih, but I've never been. Pretty much like what's it called, Yeppen?
Yep.
I've never been towards the east, from East Yeppen all the way. I guess once you get around the coast up towards Jaipur, there's probably not a lot there. But in the bay,
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I should have said that's another place that we're going to be exploring.
Okay.
Here. So the east side of Cendrawasih, basically from Nabire up that coastline to where Yapen almost touches the bay, that's pretty crocodile-y.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's very, very, mangrove, low visibility,
gotcha.
Lots of crocs, etc. There are two sets of island groups, the Moor Islands and I can't remember the other one, but there's two island groups that are maybe about 20 nautical miles north of Nabire, which are sometimes swept by big freshwater outflows from the rivers, and then they're pretty low visibility, but then that dies down when there's not any rain, and that's really clear, and it's clear drop-offs and actually very beautiful. So those have some interest if you ever could get out to those, but you have to get there when there's no rain, because otherwise it's pretty low vis. But we are planning a big expedition actually in February, where we'll go from Biak to Jayapura, and we're going to do that coastline up there. And there are a series of islands along that way. To be sure, there's the Mamberamo River and its tributaries, which dump out there. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of crocs and this, that, and the other. But I've flown over it enough times that I know that there's good reef development on those islands. And as you get close to Jayapur, there's a thing called Depapre Bay, which I've done 1-2-day mission to in order to get a new species of walking shark there, and I was really quite intrigued by it. There's some interesting things in that as well. So I think that there's some interesting possibilities. I don't know. My concern is what the weather will be like in terms of waves.
It's all exposed.
But we're going to give it a go. We'll report back to you.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Speaking of crocodiles, any close encounters?
You mean over the course of my time in Indonesia?
Yeah.
You know, I've been fortunate to not actually run into them underwater. But it's interesting when you ask that, because if I look at some of the places that, in particular, Max Ammer dragged me into in the early 2000s in Raja, where you just looked around and you're like, this is not a good place. He's like, oh, no, we haven't seen any no crocodiles here. And I took my kids snorkeling in some of those places. I mean, I did some really stupid things. And almost every one of those places where I felt a little tinge back then have now had crocodiles confirmed in them. And yeah, I look back, I'm like, geez. But I think part of that also, though, is that I think that crocs have moved into a lot of those areas in Raja Ampat just over the last 6 to 8 years, because of the development that's happening on Waigeo. And I think that they've been moving out of the rivers and moving into some of these places that looked like they were clearly good croc habitat, but for whatever reason, I guess they'd been shot out, whatever. And now they're back.
Right. And do you think that has anything to do with, like the fishermen that were in there before? Were they taking them out, and now they have no?
Partly that, without question. Without question. So people did used to, the villagers would absolutely get rid of crocodiles if they could, because they're a threat to their children and their wives, washing clothes and everything else. I don't think that there's no active hunting of crocodiles right now. No. And at the same time, as I said, there's been enough road building and construction in Waigeo that I think you flushed a lot of those crocodiles out, and they're moving into some of these reef areas.
Like
so.
Kawe Bay.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah. Interesting.
Or Wyack. I mean, there were. Did you see the photo of the one that was on Cape Cree?
Yes. Yeah, that one I saw. Yeah.
That's a big one.
I mean, that's the last place I would ever expect to see a crocodile. Yeah.
Little one.
But it was under a table coral.
Yeah. I saw a video recently. I think you posted it as well. There was from Meridian, the people from the Meridian in Waisai, and they posted a video of a swimming crocodile somewhere. I'm like, I wonder where that was. They don't say where it was, but you're like, interesting.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been fortunate that I haven't run into them underwater yet.
Yeah,
but I'm sure they've been around.
Yeah.
I see them frequently with helicopters. If I do helicopters in Raja, I think they just, for the most part, they avoid humans when you're looking for them. But they're there.
Because are they the same species as the Australian ones? Because the Australian ones seem to be, you hear them to be quite aggressive. The ones out here, they don't seem to be so much, but I'm sure they're the same.
Maybe
it's the same species. The difference, the very big difference is that in Australia they are absolutely hardcore protected and have been for the last 25, 30 years.
Right.
And so those crocs have grown up with zero fear of humans. Whereas the ones here absolutely do get hunted. I mean, all across Papua they're hunted. Not necessarily aggressively hunted, but if one comes out and kills a villager, you can be sure there will be a retribution party that goes out to find it and kill it. And so the ones here have just learned to be wary of humans, whereas in Australia they've learned that humans are possibly food, or they're not. There's no retaliation there.
Right.
So
interesting.
In Australia, almost every big animal learned that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Everything is dangerous.
Now, not getting away from this conservation stuff, but moving back to the other part. I mean, you got a lot of hats that you wear. A couple of years back, you and Jerry Allen came out with the big 3-book set.
Yep.
The East Indies fish, and on that you guys do a lot of fish ID, and you're still doing a lot of that kind of stuff where you're collecting and doing the science hat as opposed to the conservation hat.
Absolutely.
And are you doing that? Is that through Conservation International? Or is that okay? So
no,
so it's still
that's a valid part of my job. In particular, if we're doing biodiversity surveys for a government. For instance, in Fakfak, as I said, the government wanted us to survey that coastline and basically tell them what they had. And in the course of that survey that we did in March of this year, we found 10 new species, just as an example. We just described 7 new species in the last 2 months. So they're popping out on a pretty regular basis.
Is this all in recreational depths or deeper or
it's
a mix
a combination? When we were in Fakfak, actually, the majority of them were in recreational depths because we were diving in places where divers wouldn't necessarily normally go, such as in Bintuni Bay, where there are crocodiles and things. It turns out if you dive the shallow reefs in Bintuni Bay, they're full of new stuff.
Okay.
probably also full of things
Full
with
of
teeth.
crocks,
But, but
you're
we
going to make yourself a little cage that you're going to
Exactly.
swim in for that.
Yeah.
That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
And but that, I mean, taking away from your regular day job, writing a book like that must have just taken forever. Was that the whole thing? Was that a 20-year project, or was that something you guys said, okay, let's do a new book?
It was a situation where I have to give all the credit really to Jerry Allen, who's really very much my senior colleague and mentor in that. Jerry had been wanting to do that book for about 20 years. And he had been, of course, amassing this tremendous library of images of all of the species across this area. But he had this dream to do that book. But he wasn't able to get no commercial book publisher really wanted to do it, because they're like, no, people want a little book,
Right.
just the common stuff, whatever. And so where I came into that was that I'm reasonably good at finding donors who are interested in such things, and so I connected him to a family that was willing to fund that. So it ended up being a 5-year project. Once we got the funding secured, it ended up being about a 5-year project. And Jerry certainly did the vast majority of the science on it. I did the fundraising aspect to it, and then the really fun bit was actually getting the list of every single known reef fish species from this area, and then cross-matching that to all of the photographs which he already had, and coming up with a list of roughly 500 that had no photos. And then it was like, okay, we are now going to spend the next couple of years doing our best to actually get those images, and we managed to get the vast majority of them.
Yeah.
We had to, some of them we had to buy from either photographers or Jack Randall and other fish scientists who had lots of specimen shots.
Yep.
What we really wanted was live color shots if we could. And in a few cases we had to go with line drawings, because they were things that were known from one single specimen in Madang, and no one's ever seen it
Right.
since. But we had a lot of fun trying to find these things and photograph things that had never had a live photograph of, and et cetera. So it was a great project. Really enjoyed it.
That to me, that sounds fun.
Yeah, no, it was a treasure hunt. It was
Yeah.
an Easter egg hunt,
Exactly.
and we really enjoyed that. And then we published that, of course, in 2012, end of 2012, and then in late 2013 we published it as an app that's on both Android and Apple, and we've updated that now a couple of times, and we're due for another update now. But,
And now you're saying you're just finding all these new, like your recent
Yeah.
surveys, finding new stuff. Will you
add that
update?
in.
You'll update.
That's what the update is.
No,
all
but I
about.
mean, will you update the books themselves, or just
Well,
the
Jerry
apps?
is really keen to update the books. The books are sold out now.
Oh, okay.
The whole print run is
That's
gone. When you do something like that, what you find out is that basically your biggest customer are the libraries around, the universities and the libraries around the
okay.
world. So, because it's a reference set,
Yeah,
really,
right,
So
sure it is.
that was immediately, they were all sold to libraries and things, and some individual divers. But of course, you don't want to carry. I mean, that thing could stop at charging Rhino, like 15 kilos of 3 books. But Jerry wants to redo it. He wants to redo the book because he's still kind of old school book. I had thought that the app was going to be like this wonderful, way of just being able to easily update. But what I didn't realize about apps, of course, is that Apple and Android, they're constantly changing their operating systems, and in order for your app to maintain the ability to run on these, you then, as the app developer, have to pay a significant sum of money simply to update your app to that. And so we're finding ourselves on a regular basis having to put $10,000 more into it. I'm like, oh, this is not what I was hoping for.
He was just,
So let's link the app. In
he
the
was researching
description,
apps
so-
a little while ago, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is how much it was." And I'm like, "You're kidding, right? $10,000? What?
Yeah,
Yeah, amazing.
that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's link the app in the description.
Yeah,
so
well,
people
we'll do
can
that for the
download
books.
it.
Yeah, exactly. You'll see that on the thing.
Yeah.
And what about different? As you say, now your job is encompassing different areas in Southeast Asia and the Pacific and all that. Are you doing all these reef surveys in those areas too?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, and I dragged Jerry along there too.
Okay.
So we've done Fiji, Samoa, New Caledonia, quite a bit in Papua New Guinea now, and that's all. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not Papua New Guinea is pretty much as rich as what we have in West Papua, but the other ones, it's nowhere near the. You get to Fiji and it's 65-70% of the diversity that you have
Right.
in West Papua. But Milne Bay is still absolutely a gold mine, which Jerry did a lot of early work in the 1990s there, but now we're going back and with me doing deeper diving and hitting down to 70 meters, and we're finding lots of new stuff there. And it's a lot of fun. And it's kind of funny because, you know, Milne Bay in the 90s and early 2000s, that was where everybody, all the high-end divers were going. And it was actually the promotion of West Papua that ended up killing it killed the tourism industry, right? Because it was cheaper and every bit as good at diving, and you know, more reliable flights and blah blah blah. So the liveaboard industry in PNG is taking a beating,
big time,
which is sad. But then the really nice thing for me is you go there and you don't see a single other tourist. You know,
and that's the one thing I've always kind of said is like, all right, you know, you go to Raja Ampat or Komodo now, and you've got all these liveaboards, and I'm still looking over at PNG going, hold it, there's only you know, a handful of liveaboards over there. Why does everybody want to do one in Indonesia? Why don't some of these people that want to do one in Indonesia, instead of having 47 other competitors, you could go over there and have 3 competitors? Have you guys started doing it, or CI thought of doing anything like location building in other areas outside of Indonesia, like they've done in Indonesia? Is that
we are trying to do that in Fiji right now.
Okay.
For the Lao Seascape in the southeast of the country. In PNG, we haven't had that approach because we had a big program there back in the 90s and early 2000s, and it just, for whatever reason, it proved to be quite difficult. I mean, PNG is a much harder place to work, quite frankly, than Indonesia. You know, there's a lot more lawlessness.
Yeah.
You have real safety concerns there, real piracy issues, real whatever, and yeah, it's a lot more expensive to work. The flights are more expensive. They're far less reliable, and
harder to get to.
Which is sad because it really is an amazingly beautiful place, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to work there. That doesn't mean it's not worth it.
Right.
I mean, whenever I get an opportunity to go there with donors, I'll go there in a heartbeat. The one sad thing I would say is, you know, as you mentioned about the Red Sea, when you have a lot of liveaboards, on the one hand, it's like, well, okay, there's a lot of guests around, but they do act as a de facto patrol.
Yep.
Right. And so even though there's some damage that happens from having lots of divers, there's also there's protection that happens from having a lot of divers too. And I have to say that's the one sad thing I would say about PNG now is that there's nowhere near the shark populations that there used to be. So tourism is gone. There's really no people out there, and shark finning has absolutely, whereas it's gone down in Indonesia, it's taken off over there. And in fact, even manta poaching has now just started in Milne Bay.
Really?
And unfortunately, there's no one there really to stop it, and that's a sad thing to me. But so from that perspective, when you were talking about whether liveaboards that are now kind of crowding into Raja want to start exploring other areas and spreading it, that to me that's great, because as the liveaboards expand into new areas, it means you start having less destructive activities going on too. So because they are de facto patrols. So I'm very supportive. If people want to leave Raja Ampat and go work Halmahera or Maluku, by all means, you know, go for it. So
I would agree.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we want to ask you about here, you've had a successful 20 plus 30, maybe not quite 30, but 20 plus years working in the marine conservation area. What about, you're looking at a lot of grassroots stuff these days. It's growing, so say you're looking at a lot of, as you say, local people getting into the grassroots organizations, younger people coming in. What would you say for high school students or university students that are an interest in marine biology or marine conservation? What kind of steps would they take? What kind of what's the word I'm looking for? What kind of advice would you have for a keen marine conservation biologist, whatever, to get into the field? You know, this side of the world or South Pacific or anywhere really.
Right. Are you talking about students that are coming from Western countries or from Indonesia? Because Indonesia
would be even better.
So we are now, I have to say, I'm really impressed by the quality of some of the students that are coming out of Indonesian universities now and high schools. Between the internet and social media, there's been an enormous increase in awareness and interest in the marine realm. And so with Indonesian students, it's very easy for us to promote that because they don't have any of the issues of work permits and research permits and that a foreigner would have coming into Indonesia. And so we're actively trying to get them as engaged as we possibly can. And there's lots to be, Indonesia still has so much to be done. There's so much of the archipelago which is unprotected right now, which is unexplored right now. And so we're now trying to come up with some fellowship programs. I think my colleague who you know quite well, I believe also Sarah Lewis, working with a celebrity, Hamish Dowd. They've come up with this program called Indonesian Ocean Pride, which I'm an advisor to. And that is really going to try to be, besides kind of in social media helping raise some of the profiles of these issues, also trying to actively get Indonesian young people out into the field and just let them start some projects in some of these lesser known places. Everybody wants to go to Komodo or Raja Ampat, and there certainly is some need for that. But why not go and start up the new conservation program in Rote or in Banda or the Halmahera, Bacan, whatever it might be. All of those places have tremendous potential. A lot of it has been damaged to some extent, but if we focused on some of those areas for 5 years, you'd be amazed at how things would come back, I think. So for Indonesian students in particular, I have huge optimism that we're going to see a real, an army of new marine conservationists descending upon the reefs of Indonesia. I'm very happy about that.
That's good.
For those in developed countries, to be sure, there's still lots and lots and lots of opportunity out there. You will face the issue of when you come into foreign countries like Indonesia, if you do it the right way, there's volunteer programs that can be done. But you do have to watch out for the issue of work permits and research permits and that kind of thing. But if you're in Australia, you're in America, or you're in Europe, all of those areas have their own reefs and their own marine ecosystems which need help as well. So I think that increasingly the world has really woken up in the last decade to the fact that the oceans are sick and need help. And there's a lot of pessimistic talk out there, but there's a lot of things worth left saving.
Do you think it's actually a growing, not industry, but a growing,
I reckon,
education system and all that stuff, protection?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. Look at the tremendous increase in interest and concern over marine plastics, marine pollution, in the last 2 or 3 years, right? It's ramped up dramatically. That was considered unsexy. Nobody wanted to talk about marine. Nobody liked it.
You're right.
But it wasn't something which you never heard of any groups that were actually going to try to do something about it.
You wouldn't get the media about it.
And now it's like the biggest thing ever, right? Yep. That's wonderful. I'm like, get out there and do it.
It's back, 15 years ago. So, you're a marine biologist. So you must be a dive guide or something like that.
Right,
but
exactly.
now there's actually a field for it and a growth sector, which is good.
Yeah.
So you have a positive outlook on the future of reef conservation and fish conservation.
Most definitely. If you listen too hard to what comes out of the scientific community, it's pretty bleak, the outlook that they have for reefs in particular because of climate change and some of the other issues. But, I think one of the things which I feel very strongly about when it comes to reefs is that the textbook examples that we have of reefs came from the Great Barrier Reef, Eniwetok, the Bahamas, a few well-known reef systems close to developed countries, French Polynesia, etc. And those are perfectly great reefs. They don't necessarily represent everything which there is to know about reefs. And when we say, oh, well, reefs can only survive in water that's between 24 degrees and 29 degrees Celsius, and if it goes above that, they bleach, they die, da-da-da-da-da. And that's based upon those experiences from there. But as both of you will well know from having dived a lot around Indonesia, there are reef systems that are growing in all kinds of environments, right? I mean, Bintuni Bay is an example. Total freshwater, really, really murky, hot. So it's hot, fresh, and murky. And there's corals that are thriving in there.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean? To me, it means that reefs have already adapted to a lot more than we give them credit for. And we might not have, the Great Barrier Reef is definitely in trouble, and it's definitely dying. And it might even die almost entirely. But there's a lot of work right now to identify those areas of the world where corals are actually doing okay in very marginal environments, much hotter or colder or fresh or silty than what we think they can live in, and yet they're there. So we might have to go to some quite extremes of serious management of translocation from some of those areas, and taking their zooxanthellae, their symbiotic algae, and re-inoculating those on the Great Barrier Reef, whatever. Right. I mean, this is serious, getting your hands dirty into it, but we might have to do that. But I think that exists. There is that possibility.
Okay. Interesting.
So we have a hope for the future.
I have hope. We have to have hope.
Of course.
I do have hope. I live in Indonesia. I see that it's doing quite well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And becoming better and better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you look at the growth of how many different, just in the last 5 years, mantas protected huge swaths of marine protected areas with sharks and mantas and all that. So it's very positive here, and hopefully positive elsewhere as well. Well, what's your next big project? I know you're doing a lot of whale shark tagging, manta tagging as well. What else? What big projects are on the horizon?
So here in Indonesia, you're correct that over the last 5 years, I and CI have started really focusing a lot on the shark and ray issues, and that's because Indonesia, for the past 30 plus years, has been the world's largest shark and ray fishery. Over 100,000 tons landed every year.
Wow.
And I can say, when I first moved to Indonesia, the notion of shark conservation, like there just was no such thing, right? And it was only really when Raja Ampat made the bold move of creating a shark and ray sanctuary that it just came at the right time. Suddenly there was globally there was a lot more interest in sharks and rays. And we were able to take what happened with Raja Ampat's very bold move as a government and promote that at the national level, and suddenly get the Ministry of Fisheries attention that hey, this is also an issue that we need to worry about. And because economically mantas and whale sharks, of course, are worth far more alive than dead, they were a pretty easy one to take on as like the first step, right? Because they're charismatic, they can earn a lot of money in tourism, etc. And so that was a great first step. At this point in time, the Indonesian government, the Ministry of Fisheries in particular, is now serious about actually really looking more comprehensively at shark and ray conservation. And so we are pushing down that road. And the first species that they're interested in going after and addressing are some of the other protected ones, which now include the hammerheads, the threshers, oceanic white tips, and then possibly some of the little bottom sharks, like the walking sharks in Papua. So we are now starting programs on all of those groups, where we are going to be doing some tagging of those, not because I necessarily like to stick poles into sharks, but the tagging is a great way of developing getting some of the data that we need to be able to show how these sharks move, where they aggregate, that kind of a thing. And it brings attention of both the public as well as the government to these animals. Yep. And when you start to see like what they do, you learn a little bit more about them and you get more interested in protecting them. So we do feel that there's a value in doing some more tagging work, which we're going to be doing, especially on hammerheads and threshers, now. And we're going to be doing, hopefully getting a number of Indonesian students focused on doing some population studies on the walking sharks around Papua, because we're now convinced that there are some serious threats to them. They've become a major aquarium export kind of under the radar screen, but it's happening now.
Right.
And so we want to get the data on that and hopefully actually get them listed as protected species in Indonesia so that they can't be exported anymore, because they really can't support a serious hunting of them. So we're going to be doing that, I would say. The mobula rays as well, time to expand from mantas to mobulas, and possibly some work on some of the bigger stingrays as well. So that's I'd say that's some of the interesting stuff that we're hoping to really jump into and push hard in Indonesia. Outside of Indonesia, you know, I'm now very focused in Fiji on the Lau group of islands, which is not very well known in the marine tourism industry. We've got a humpback whale calving area there, which is quite interesting. Nowhere near the marine biodiversity of Indonesia, but nonetheless quite good, and good communities. And so we've now created a sister Seascape arrangement between West Papua, Bird's Head Seascape, and the Laos Seascape in Fiji. And we've had some exchanges of some of the...
So we're going to see some kava going into...
I had a bunch of Papuans drinking kava just back in May, so it was quite fun. Yeah.
The beetle nut over there in Fiji.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're getting into the kava then.
Exactly.
I haven't been to Fiji 2002 was the last time I was there. I just still remember just glorious soft corals.
Yeah.
But I guess the group you're talking about is further east than what I would have.
You were probably Taviuni and Rainbow Reef and some of those.
Yeah,
maybe.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Good.
So,
Gets you out of the house more. Not that you're ever in the house. Anything you want to say, particular that we haven't talked about?
You know, I think we've largely hit it. I just I like to just simply stress that I'm still optimistic about our oceans. I mean, there are some major threats. The oceans are hurting right now, but especially here in Indonesia, as a whole, it's a hope spot for the planet. And there's, in particular, some very specific areas where it's largely positive. And so I like to have people remembering that it's not all doom and gloom, and that there's absolutely much worth saving here, and that it can be saved. And everybody has a role to play in that, whether it means not having single-use plastic bits and pieces that end up in the ocean, to patronizing dive operations which are environmentally concerned, all of the visiting local communities that are actually concerned about marine conservation. All of those are things which everyone can do, and then of course those that want to dedicate their lives to it, then there's lots of opportunity there. So to me it's a positive thing, and we should be looking at how we can fix things as opposed to just giving up, because I think that we're not at a point of needing to give up. Right.
Good. There's not so much the doom and gloom that you see necessarily. Okay. Good. Well, all right. Well, thank you for coming in. We know you've got places to be, but thanks for sharing 20 plus years here and working in the marine conservation area. So if you like this episode, be sure to make a comment down there in the comments. Please hit the like if you haven't done that before. Subscribe if you are interested in seeing more of our podcasts, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.